Hi, it's a beautiful day here. I don't know what it is where you are, but the sun is shining into my room here, so that really makes me happy. So today I'm going to be talking about expat divorces or divorces with an international element, and I'm going to be talking with Alexandra, and I can see her, so hopefully she will accept my invitation to join the live any minute, hopefully. I'm a divorce coach and narcissist recovery coach, and it's my quest to of divorce and encourage you to know it can actually be a very empowering event and something that you can really embrace. Hi, Alexandra.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm amazed that worked. Brilliant.
So
Lovely to see you.
Yes, you too. So it's your first Instagram live, is that right?
It is. It is. I was worried I wouldn't click the right thing, but it was quite easy.
Yeah, it is actually. I remember the first one I ever did and I was really worried about it. And it is so easy, but you always wonder, is it going to be the first time? It's not. So, yeah. So I was just introducing myself and saying, you know, I'm a divorce coach and narcissistic recovery coach, and it's my mission, my passion to really encourage people to know that the end of the marriage is not the end of everything, and it can actually turn it around and
Yes.
be really an empowering event. I do know, obviously, I've been through divorce myself after 25 years. It's also the most traumatic, second most traumatic thing you're going to experience in your life. And
Yes.
I'm not making it sound like it's easy, because it's not. And it took me, I'd say, a good year before I felt what I would call normal again. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Alexandra Tribe, and I'm the managing partner of Expatriate Law. I'm a solicitor just specialising in international family law. So I help British expats who are living overseas, and I help multinational families who are living in England. And I started specialising in international family law about 15 years ago. I lived in Dubai for 8 years, where I represented British expats who are living in that region. And from that, we started up Expatriate Law, my father and I, about 12 years ago. And we decided just to specialise in helping expats because it's a very niche field. And having that experience from living and practicing law in the Middle East has helped me continue to advise expats from that region. And it's an area of law that I really enjoy.
It's quite a minefield. I mean, I personally, the reason I really wanted to talk to you today is because I personally was abroad when I had my divorce. I left England about 27 years ago, and I was actually in Switzerland.
Yeah.
I had my divorce. My husband was Swiss, but we were married in England. And, you know, I didn't really know what to do. Eventually got divorced in Switzerland, but it's a real...
Did you? You got divorced in Switzerland. So the financial outcome for you may have been much different had you divorced in England. But I find when I speak to new inquiries, they assume they have to divorce either in the place in which they were married or the place in which they're living now. They don't realise that actually there can be more connections for them, and they could potentially divorce in England even if they themselves are not English, even if their spouse is the one with connections to England. So I know we'll go on to discuss that, but there's lots that can be done.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because I think one of the worst things, I think, when you initially decide you're divorcing, or somebody decides for you, if it's your spouse who wants the divorce, is that time where I just felt like a bit of a deer in the headlights. There was this huge elephant in the room, and I wasn't sure what to do, where to start. So it's really, I really wanted to explain to so many expats abroad, particularly I've lived in many countries in America. I've lived in France, I've lived in Switzerland,
Oh, right.
Belgium. Yeah. So, you know, I've met a lot of expats along the way, and know that it's quite, you know, when you're away from your family as well, you're completely on your own in lots of ways. So it's a really important that we actually get the message out there that you don't, what your options are really.
Yeah. And it's difficult because if we were all living in England at the time of separation, it's natural to want to discuss these issues with your spouse.
Yeah.
everyone hopes to have an amicable divorce and should be able to have an amicable divorce. But for that to happen, there has to be a level of trust and openness. And when you're living abroad and there's a number of different potential jurisdictions for divorce, it can be really tricky and also unhelpful for you to have those open discussions with your spouse, because your partner is going to be wanting to obviously do things hopefully in a good way, but also they'll be trying to protect themselves. So you're both going to have different agendas. You're both going to want a divorce in a jurisdiction which is going to be most financially beneficial for you. So, you know, for example, if you were living in Switzerland, one of you might be English, one of you might be French, and you're living in Switzerland, but you've got property elsewhere. You may have 4 potential jurisdictions for divorce, and the financial outcome in those different jurisdictions can be very different. Some countries don't allow a husband to make spousal claims against the wife. Some countries don't allow claims against pensions or pre-acquired assets. Some countries take a more fair sharing view to the division of assets. And the outcome will vary so significantly from one country to the next, even within Europe. So that's why it's important to get that early advice. And it can seem quite an overwhelming task, because if I speak to a new inquiry, I will say, well, we can give you advice on what the outcome would be in England. But I recommend you see one of these 2 French lawyers and also one of these Swiss lawyers, because actually you may be better in Switzerland. And the timing of a divorce is very important. And that's why I come back to having those initial discussions with your husband can be quite tricky, because if you alert them to the fact that you're seeking advice and you're trying to work out which jurisdiction is best for you, they may start to do the same. So there are a lot of initial considerations.
Yeah, and certainly it wasn't until I was sort of into mine that I actually tripped over some of the things that were different, which I assumed wouldn't be different. And, you know, lots of things came up, and I could, you know, in hindsight, I think I did the right thing. But who knows? But, you know, I would have liked to have known more at the start and looked at all the options, which I didn't do, because, you know, my husband started it, and before you know where you are, the ball is kind of rolling. So, and also, you know, in Switzerland, there's different cantons. You have to get divorced in the canton where the family home is. So different cantons have different ideas. There's no grounds for divorce, for instance, in Switzerland, apart from physical abuse. So it's so different. And you can't get a divorce in Switzerland until you've reached a financial settlement.
Right.
Which is very different from how it goes in the UK. You can actually get divorced here before you've reached the financial settlement. So I understand. Yeah. So
what people should look at this initial stage when they're considering separation, talking to your spouse is going to be very important, but put yourself first and make sure you get that right advice for you at the initial stage. Once you've had that initial advice and you know for sure, okay, England is going to be my preferred jurisdiction and it's going to be the best for me in terms of being able to enforce the orders that come from the English courts, and the best in terms of outcome, and the best in terms of the interim help that you can get for maintenance and things like that, then you can consider the best way of discussing things with your spouse, whether those settlement discussions are going to be face-to-face or through a mediator or something more formal, such as arbitration or court proceedings. There's lots of different options for reaching these agreements.
Yeah, and I think then you know everything. What I like to do is have all the knowledge in front of me, and then I can make a considered decision. Whereas the way I actually did it in the end, I was tripping over the knowledge as the train had left the station. But yeah, and one of the most important things, I think, if you've got young children, you really need to look very carefully at where you have the divorce. Because for instance, in Switzerland, you can't, if the children are under 18, they can't leave the country or the canton without the other spouse's permission. So you suddenly might think, well, I'll go back to England with the children. That's not possible.
Yeah, it can be an absolute minefield. So the early advice is very important. Also, I would help a client seeking advice from different countries to prepare a list of questions that they put to the other lawyers. Mm-hmm. For example, if I was to divorce in Switzerland, can I claim interim maintenance to help me while we settle the long-term issues? And if I divorce in Switzerland, can the court order my husband to pay my legal fees in the interim? And if I divorce in Switzerland, can certain orders be enforceable against the assets that we have in different countries? So it's helpful to have an initial guideline for the questions that you put towards your solicitor in those different countries, so you can bring all that information together and make an informed choice about where to divorce. Mm-hmm. England, for some people, is not the best place to divorce. If you're the financially stronger party, it may be less favourable to you. There may be other jurisdictions which will see a much better financial outcome. England is good jurisdiction for those who wish to seek interim financial remedies, because the English courts have an excellent system for allowing interim maintenance claims. Usually an application made will come before a judge within about 6 weeks, which is brilliant. Yeah. And together with that, a wife who is the financially weaker party can often make an application for a legal services provision order. This is something that's fairly new in the last 5 years, but it's really seen an adjustment of the balance of power between separating couples. Because for so long we saw, if we were acting for a wife would feel, well, I'm limited in the help that I can get. I've never had independent savings. I don't even know where our bank accounts are, and I can't afford legal fees. Therefore, I feel obliged to reach an early settlement because I can't afford a lawyer. And now, with the provision of the legal services provision order, that's stamped out, because a wife's solicitor can write to the husband straight away and say, we want to deal with things amicably, we want to progress some negotiations, but to do that, our client's going to need some legal fees. This is the work that needs to be done. This is how much it will cost. Please provide us with those fees so we can advise your wife. And if the husband doesn't agree, then an application can be made that will come before the court quite quickly. And the court can award a payment to the wife on an interim basis for legal fees, so that she can feel that she gets the advice that she needs. It's really important. Only this morning I spoke to a client who lives in England, who has been battling along with the English court system on her own. Her husband earns enough money, and he's got his whole legal team beside him, his solicitor, his barrister, and she's 3/4 of the way through the process and has her settlement hearing on Friday. And she said, I'm really scared going to court on my own. I couldn't afford help. And what shall I do? And so I was able to say, well, look, you mustn't be bullied into settlement. Her husband had offered her £3,000 as full settlement, even though he owned his own home and earned a very good income. And so, you know, it's important to take a step back and see that the English court will balance out that level of power so that financial help is available for both parties so they can get the right advice.
And that is really important, because a lot of clients that I see have narcissistic partners, and they are very financially controlling. So they have hardly any access sometimes to funds to be able to fight. So the English system is good. And I mean, if you take in Switzerland, it's not so good. So quite often some women, and I've seen it, have to settle because they haven't got the money to fight. So they actually compromise because they can't go on any longer. Because, you know, sometimes divorces there can go on for 5 years. So what do you do?
Yeah, no, it's very difficult. And this is going to be the financial settlement that lasts you for the rest of your life. And if women have been in violent relationships or emotionally controlling relationships, I see it all the time, they just want to get out.
Yes.
I can't count the number of times I've sat in front of a client who said, Alexandra, I don't want to battle. I've battled for so long and I just want out of it. I don't care what I don't care where I live or what I have. I just want out. Do it as quickly as possible. And it shouldn't have to be like that, because a lawyer's job is to take away that stress and panic from the client and take that burden on our shoulders to be able to negotiate for them and achieve the settlement that they need without causing them any more stress and anxiety, and without them having to face battle with their spouse, which they may have been doing for some time.
Yeah, and also I've seen that some of my clients are actually already divorced and have come back to me because they're back in court with their narcissistic ex, battling for financial maintenance for the children or different access because they signed something, because they just had that knee-jerk reaction that you've just described that they needed to get out. So that will come back to haunt you.
Yeah.
And really finding the strength, like you said, and using a whole divorce team to take that stress down, dial it, and be able to cope and get through. Because it will end and you will get there and you can do it. But quite often this type of person, if they've been controlling during the marriage, during a divorce, they're taking it even to another level of intimidation, manipulation and control to try and force you to actually settle, because you just want to get on with your life.
Yeah.
Because it's so, I mean, a pension, I would imagine, I got divorced after 25 years. So, pension was something that was important on my settlement. I mean, it's, I think in the UK, the state pension doesn't count, it doesn't come into it. But in other countries, your state pension would come into it. There's all sorts of different ways you need to look at the pensions, isn't there?
Yes, and it's very, I've had quite a few inquiries recently for people who've divorced overseas. For example, if they were born in, let's say France, and then they've travelled around to various different places as expats, but they had a stint working in London for, say, 10 years. And during that time, the husband obtained, generated a pension in England. And then they moved and settled in Australia or wherever, and they divorced in the Australian courts. And then they come to me after their divorce saying, oh, we agreed a pension share, so I'm supposed to receive 50% of my husband's pension. And I've only just found out that the pension provider in England won't listen to an Australian pension sharing order. They won't put into effect that pension share. And we should have got an English pension sharing order. What can we do? There is something we can do by applying to court under Part 3, which is an area of law which allows for a financial claim after a foreign divorce. And that's an application we can do by consent. But that's another example of how important it is to, when you're meeting your lawyer, whichever country they're in, make sure you think about these issues, the future enforceability, the future recognition of court orders, and how you might need advice from different jurisdictions to get the complete package of help that you need. Many clients that I deal with live in the Middle East, and I find that the legal advisors who are local lawyers often don't advise about the options available to these clients in other countries. If they're expats, they may be able to divorce in their home countries or the home countries of their spouse, or even divorce in a country that they have just some connection to. For example, you can divorce in England if either you or your husband are habitually resident in England, or if you and your husband are domiciled in England. So it doesn't have to be both of you. The connection can be through one of you. And to be domiciled in England, you don't necessarily need to have been born in England. You can acquire an English domicile if you live in England for a period of time, intending to make it your permanent home. So, for example, if you lived overseas as expats, but you had a holiday home in England, and you spent increasing amounts of time in England during the summer months, or your children are at boarding school in England, the jump to having the correct connection to be able to divorce in England is quite easy to make. So don't rule out a jurisdiction. Make sure that you get the advice everywhere that's needed to make sure that the jurisdiction is right for you.
Yeah, because I mean, we had, you can imagine, so we've moved countries so many times. There was pensions in 4 countries, there were properties in 3 countries. So, you know, so you really, really need to drill down into all of that and make sure you know what you're signing and what you're getting. And
Yeah.
I certainly included a financial specialist in it as well, and I would highly recommend that. Because
Yes, I agree. Really important, because if you've lived as an expat, I mean, I was working, obviously, when I lived abroad. We moved abroad for my husband's job, but I was very happy to work out there as a lawyer. But I found that living as an expat, especially in the Middle East, there was a feeling that the women shouldn't get involved in the financial side. And that applied even to me, and I'm a lawyer. I found that when I used our joint account, my husband would get a text message to say that I'd spent X amount of pounds in Harvey Nichols or whatever. It's more customary in the Middle East for the men to have control over the finances. And even in the Middle East, to set up a bank account, I needed to get a no objection certificate from my husband. I had to get a no objection certificate from him to allow me to work. You know, neither of us are Muslim, and you know, we're Western, of course, but the culture and way things work are different. So it's not unusual for a client to come to me who's lived as an expat with very little knowledge of their financial position. And that's not something to be ashamed of.
no,
That is a natural result of living abroad as an expat. I think it's very difficult to be more in control.
yeah, I mean, I remember my lawyer sitting me down and saying, well, we need to go through the monthly spend. And I thought, oh, okay, this could be interesting. Well, I didn't really know. And I thought, oh, gosh, I feel a bit stupid. But I shouldn't feel stupid because, like you say, it's so often the case.
Yeah.
I still got a grip on it.
I bet you did. That's good.
Yeah, but it was quite, I thought, gosh, you know, I did feel almost like, oh, how do I say this? But, you know, I just did. And we laughed about it, really. But she wasn't really surprised, my lawyer. So, you know, she said it happens more often. You think, and particularly if you've been in a controlling relationship, even in any culture, you might not have a grip on it. And you might have willingly decided that you know, you let somebody else do that.
Yeah.
You didn't want to, so suddenly it comes home. So
Yeah.
I was interested when I was looking in, so you obviously work in Dubai, you've got something with the Anglo-French.
So we're a team of 15. We have the majority of us are in our London office, obviously not today during lockdown, but usually we're in Old Bailey. And we have a new office in Singapore and a team in the UAE. And those are all English lawyers based overseas, just helping British people who reside. The Singapore team help people who reside in Asia, and the UAE team help British people living in the Middle East. And then the London team help the others. I have a lovely colleague, Melanie, who is French speaking, who specialises in Anglo-French divorces. So either British expats living in France or French expats living in England. And similarly, we have a lawyer, Lauren, who practiced law in South Africa for 4 years. She's an English qualified lawyer, but has excellent South Africa experience. So she deals with all our cases where Brits are living in South Africa and other parts of Africa. So I encourage our team to forge their connections in the different regions in which they specialise, because it allows them to advise on the overlap of laws, which is really important. Yeah. Every different country has something unique to it. You know, our lawyers in the Middle East advise on the issues relating to expats there, like the gratuity packages, which are common in the Middle East, and the visa issues, and the children issues for custody under Sharia law and things like that. So as a team, we have diverse skills to advise expats in different regions.
Yeah, because I think France is like, there's so many expats in France, and I think that's always a dilemma for them. And I understand divorces can go on quite a long while there. too?
Yes, yes, they can. Well, my understanding is there's a fairly new system for divorce in France, and it's super efficient and speedy, but it relies on you having reached a financial settlement. So there's
very like the Swiss.
Yeah, if you haven't agreed, it takes much longer. But I've really enjoyed working on, I've seen over the years how divorce cases have evolved. It's not just about court anymore. In fact, court is really a last resort. And we find ourselves helping clients in so many different ways these days, such as having virtual roundtable meetings. You know, you might have one client living in one country and a spouse living in another country. And the roundtable meetings with barristers in London to help negotiate and settle really quickly in a cost-effective way. And other options for settlement, such as arbitration and mediation. So there's lots of ways of dealing with things now that don't involve the dreaded court proceedings.
Yeah, because that, I mean, in England, that is so expensive, because you then into particularly if you go, you know, the Form E route and you go right to the top where the judge is actually on the third meeting, where the judge is going to make the decision, and you're into an awful lot of money then, aren't you? And it's just, sometimes it's but that tends to be with high conflict divorces where maybe one partner cannot really mediate, doesn't want to mediate. But...
Well, it helps, as I discussed, the legal services provision orders. If the spouse is paying the legal fees in advance, then they tend to be more keen to engage in mediation and arbitration and to not go the expensive court route. So that's good all round, I think.
Yeah, actually, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because then it's their money, double whammy, isn't it? So yeah.
And there's perhaps also important to talk about the issues not just relating to divorce, because there are many families living as expats who are not married, and they maybe unmarried families with children living overseas, or they may be a mother who has had a very short relationship and a child has been born, and then they've been left without financial help. So even if they're living overseas, if they have the connections to England, they can, through themselves or through the father of the child, they can make the financial claims they need in England. Not to a similar level as during divorce, but still maintenance and also provision of a home to live in with the child during the child's minority, school fees, nursery help, a range of things like that. So we also help unmarried individuals who want to make financial claims in that way.
Oh, so that's good, because quite often there's a language barrier as well. I mean, I had a language barrier. So I had lived in Switzerland and I lived in the French-speaking part, so I speak French. But suddenly my divorce was in the German-speaking part. And, you know, when you're trying to understand legal language anyway, it can be challenging, but when it's in German, so if they've got somebody like your company, then you've got specialists who not only understand the law and the overlapping laws, you've got people who actually can help you make sure that you're interpreting the exact nuance of what you're signing or agreeing to in a good way, because quite often it's very complicated to know exactly what's being said, what's being agreed.
Yes, a range of different issues, and there's other things that that might be interesting to raise, just in terms of those initial stages. People considering separation might want to think about the emergency remedies that are available if there are worrying things that are happening during the separation stage. So things that we can help with are non-molestation orders, obtaining protection when there's been domestic violence. And we recently had a case where we were able to obtain such protective injunctions against a husband, even when both of the parties lived in Dubai. So there are a range of different orders that are available as protective measures, not only when domestic violence is involved, but also if you suspect that your spouse is moving funds overseas or selling things that he shouldn't, or gifting significant assets. there are steps that can be taken to protect those assets or overturn the transfer. So do seek legal advice is my recommendation. Don't cast a blind eye to these things happening, because there's certainly remedies that are available.
So are you using forensic accountants then when you're looking for money being used in that way? Or
we can do that during the disclosure process. Forensic accountants tend to be very expensive, so it's got to be proportionate to the assets involved in the case. We had a very interesting presentation the other day by an English company who were able to if you produce the email address of the husband or the financially stronger party, they were able to come back with the names of banks that the husband held bank accounts at, using some amazing algorithm that's been developed. So they'd successfully used that within a range of English family law proceedings to prove that husbands hadn't disclosed the assets and bank accounts that they should have done. It was a really interesting presentation, and I know there'll be lots of cases that I'll be able to use that in, because unfortunately we do find cases where husbands don't disclose and where they hide assets. I had an interesting case about 4 years ago where we received the husband's bank accounts, and my client said, "I'm so sure that's not his salary. I'm so sure this is just," I said, "Well, look, we've got the bank accounts, you know, I will ask for the paper copy. If you really don't trust them, we'll ask to approach the banks and get the paper copy." And then sure enough, she found an original copy of his bank statement in the glove box in the family car. And we married up the two, and the one that he'd disclosed within court proceedings was completely different. And what he'd done is he had used a sort of PDF doctoring company in Dubai to doctor the bank accounts and to change his salary and change, you know, he'd been spending all this money on a new partner and he wanted to hide it. And they just doctored them. And this is very easily done, I'm afraid, these days, because the financial disclosure provided to the court is all now given in PDF. And we all know that it's fairly easy to alter a PDF once it's been prepared. And there are people who will do it online inexpensively. So my advice is, if you have any doubts about the truth that are in the documents, check the PDF, ask your lawyers to ascertain that it hasn't been doctored or changed since it was originally produced, and keep asking for information until you're satisfied.
Yeah, because particularly if you're an expat, because you've almost certainly got accounts in more than one country, and it gets very muddy in the water trying to put all that together. And it's not like just one country with 2 bank accounts. It's so easy, particularly if you've got somebody who's working on boards, for instance, in different countries, so they're getting all sorts of salaries, even though they're based in, you know, it just gets, it's quite a puzzle, really, isn't it, to try and unwrap it. But
And I found, especially in the Middle East, that employers are certainly more willing to be less than accurate when producing salary letters and things. You know, some surprising omissions from the level of benefits that the individual may be entitled to. So it is good to question these things. But in cases where the spouse just refuses to engage and refuses to provide disclosure, these cases do happen quite often, and the English courts don't tolerate it. So if you've issued court proceedings and the other party is failing to provide their Form E, failing to provide their bank statement so that you can negotiate a sensible settlement, then at a final hearing, the court can draw inferences on the available assets based on the parties' standard of living during the marriage and their general level of spending during the marriage and things like that. I had a case that finished only a couple of months ago involving New Zealand, where the husband just refused to provide any disclosure at all and refused to engage despite several orders being made from the court. And at the final hearing, we produced to the court the evidence that we had gathered ourselves online and through the spending during the marriage and old bank statements and things. And the husband was ordered to pay a significant sum to the wife by way of a lump sum. And so husbands or wives who try and evade providing financial disclosure don't often benefit because the court can order in the end.
Yeah, because I've got a client at the moment, so it's a he. And so on the Form E, the spouse has just given screenshots of the bank account with no balances.
Mm.
I mean, it's just, so, you know, they try all sorts, don't they, to try and...
And all it does is increase legal fees in the end, which is just frustrating.
Yeah, because then you've got the questions going backwards and forwards. Yes, I mean, yeah.
So yes, disclosure, in my view, it's best to be as open as possible and as thorough as possible in your initial disclosure. And then you're more likely to achieve a negotiated settlement without a lengthy court battle and expense. Because we've read too many cases in the press. You know, there was a case recently where a couple battled out over the ownership of a trust. And in the end, the wife ended up receiving a couple of £100,000 when the legal fees between the parties were £500,000. Yeah. So they'd spent almost 70% of their assets on legal fees. It's such a waste. So
yeah, that's often it becomes, with some people, it just becomes a point of principle to win, when actually it's just, if it's not worth arguing over, it's going to cost you more to prove it, then walk away. But unfortunately, too many people do go into that.
Well, that's where your job really helps, because it helps to bring people into a focus about what they're really trying to achieve and see sense in another way other than a legal way, really.
Yeah, so it's my aim is to sort of balance the emotion. I'm going to dial that, so when they see you, they leave all that emotional baggage by the door and go in and make rational decisions that are based on rational thoughts, not knee-jerk emotional because you know you want to get back at someone because you feel hurt. It's got to think of your future, and where you're going to go and what's sensible. Like
absolutely,
yeah.
And it will ensure that matters are settled much more promptly because the parties are in a better mindset to do so.
Yes, because you know you've removed all that emotion and hate, and particularly I think if there's been infidelity, that just seems to really be very difficult to overcome. But you know you can overcome it, and you will overcome it, but don't let it interfere with the legal side. And that's because in 5 years' time, you're not his history or she's history. You're not.
And if there are children involved, then you're going to have to co-parent your children for a long time. And, you know, having a financial settlement which is negotiated and amicable will allow you to co-parent. Getting to a stage where things have to be battled out at court can often result in you going over a certain line, which means it's very difficult to get that level of trust back again that's needed for really good future co-parenting.
Yeah, because you know you have to. There are times when you're going to have to go to school together. There's times when you're going to have to meet. So you have to think about that and put the child and the children first.
Yes,
and just
exactly.
Their interests, And I think, you know, normally that happens. I think it's rare that it doesn't happen, but it does. You know, people do, particularly in high conflict, or if there's a narcissist involved, then that becomes quite difficult. But normally they do. I was interested on your website. You say you've got your different services, and you've got the full service, dip in and dip out, and DIY advice packages. Just talk a little bit about that.
Yes, we offer either a full service divorce where we can assist from beginning to end. But we also offer a fixed fee divorce for, I mean, plenty of our clients come to us and say, we've agreed everything, we just want a divorce, just do the legal work, please. and then it's a straightforward fixed fee and very simple for us to do. We also offer a DIY divorce package, which is an online meeting where we advise you on the process and the grounds for divorce and what your divorce should look like, take you through the process, help you fill in the forms, and then you go away and do the divorce yourself online. So that's helpful for people who want to divorce while living abroad, but have straightforward issues. And we also, aside from divorce, I know we've been focusing on that today, but we advise also on a range of children issues such as child abduction, negotiating child arrangements, relocation with children from one country to the next, and those kind of issues. So, but we charge a consultation fee ranging from £200 to £400, depending on the seniority of the lawyer, and that gives an hour and a half consultation to provide advice. So it's a good starting point if you're just at the early stages and you're considering what law applies and what your initial rights are. And also if you don't know whether divorce is what you want at this stage, but you want to protect yourself and get this information in mind at an early stage.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of people sort of don't divorce or don't leave, even though they're having abuse, because they don't know where they stand. Whereas I think knowledge is power. You know, you don't have to divorce, you don't have to go through with it, but just find out how you stand and how it would work. So I think that's really important, because a lot of people spend a lot of time with what I call what ifs, thinking this, thinking that, and just go and find out, because they might have been told by the spouse, you know, you won't get the children, all sorts of things to stop them getting help if they're abused. So it's best to find out, and it's very easy to do that from you. How do people get in contact with you?
They can contact us through our website at Expatriate Law. I speak to every single one of the new inquiries that comes through to the firm, because I want every inquiry to have advice from a senior lawyer at the first. I don't farm it out to the juniors. I speak to every single new client, so I can offer reassurance and guidance at that early stage and recommend then which lawyer in our team is best. But it is frightening when you live overseas. You listen to what others are saying and friends locally who may have very different situations from you and a different set of facts. So every case, every situation is different, and different rules may apply from one person to the next. So that's why advice is important, so that you know where you are and how to protect yourself.
Yeah, and because like it's all very well talking to a friend, but like you say, they can have had a completely different experience. And also, they might be telling you things that are out of date, that laws have changed. So it's always best to go to the expert and find out, because you might have been given something to make you think, well, I can't divorce, or I can't get the when it wasn't actually true. So it's best to find out, and then you can act or you don't act. It's
But there's also tons of information on our website.
Yeah, you've got an amazing FAQ section. So yeah.
Well, there's a section that says advice for expats, and there must be about 100 articles on there on everything, ranging from how much maintenance am I entitled to, what laws apply, have I got the right to divorce in England. You know, just type it into the search box and it'll come up with a range of articles, because it's a really good idea to read up as much as you can, and the information's there to help.
Yeah, so that's great. It's lovely. I mean, thank you so much both.
Oh, it's so lovely to speak to you. Thank you so much for inviting me for my first Insta Live. I won't be as worried about it next time.
It's really, really good. It's excellent, really relaxed, and it's good. You must send me. I'm really interested in the guy who does the email.
Yes, I'll send you his details. I'll send you his details. They're the most charming men. They really are, and I think it's very interesting what they're doing, and we're all getting to know about it now as family lawyers. I'll forward you on their emails.
That's super. Thank you so much.
Oh, lovely to speak. Take care. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.